Good evening and welcome to this edition of Biz1st in Focus. I am Shahan Jarampati, your host this evening. And tonight we are going to discuss on the country's current economic and financial status. The question is, are we in a crisis or not? To give us these answers, we are joined by former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena. Doctor, thank you for joining us on the show this evening.
Welcome.
Doctor, as I mentioned, is the country's economic and
it has been an established fact because we had been in a crisis not today, from around say year 2012. Economic crisis has now of course worsened in the last 2 to 3 year period, and everybody would have noted that our economic growth has slowed down from around say 6 to 7% 6 years ago to nearly 4% year 2016. Foreign reserves have declined, exports have declined. At the same time, we have been hit by weather also, the agricultural production has declined. So with all these matters, that at the same time, the inflation rate is now picking up. The latest information on a national basis, which is being measured by the Department of Census and Statistics, as at the end of March, it has moved up from 8.2% to 8.6%. So everything is not in a good situation in Sri Lanka today, and we have to admit the fact that we need immediate corrective measures in order to overcome this situation.
Doctor, now what do we attribute this so-called crisis to?
There are several reasons. Reason number one is in the past we had been investing basically in areas where we would be producing goods only for the local economy, and the whole economic growth during the last 10-year period we had got by producing for the domestic economy. But of course Sri Lanka is a country which had depended on foreign trade for a long period of time, and as a result the declining trend in the exports had been observed from year around 2005, and we had early 2000s we had about exports about 1/3 of the total output of Sri Lanka, which has now come down to less than 12%. And because of this reason, we don't have enough foreign exchange which we have earned through normal channels, and as a result we have to pay back the foreign debt that we have obtained in the past. All these things have been compounded together, and we have been pushed to this current economic crisis.
Doctor, now given what you have said, Finance Minister Ravi Karunanika continues to be optimistic about the
of course, we'll have to admit the fact that as political leaders they have to be so, because their job is to put a very bold face to the rest of the world. Otherwise what would happen is everybody would get disappointed and they will get frustrated. To avoid that kind of a situation, the political leadership will have to come up with good stories. So that's the...
But Doctor, is it a matter of being bold or transparent?
Of course the transparency is, of course, it's known to everyone, because the statistics that are being published by the central bank on a weekly basis reveal the true picture of the economy, but unfortunately not many people can refer to those statistics. So as a result, for a short period of time a person in power can give a better picture to the rest of the people in the country, but after some time the people will come to know the true situation. So as you say, transparency is the most important factor when it comes to economic matters, and we can't hide the facts from the members of the public for a long period of time. And when we do so, what would happen is the final problem that we would be facing would become much bigger than the problem that we would have had earlier.
Now, Doctor, given what you have said again, over the weekend, Finance Minister Ravi Karunanika issued a statement from Washington highlighting to the US Chamber of Commerce the investment opportunities in Sri Lanka. Could you touch on that?
Well, yeah, we have investment opportunities. I mean, what he has said and in USA is perfectly correct. Sri Lanka is a very profitable investment destination for any investor. So there's nothing wrong in his statement there. But what matters to us today is that if we want to attract those foreign investments, we have to put our house in order. So putting our house in order means we'll have to have rule of law in Sri Lanka, because it appears to us now the rule of law is not being observed by the government. Then law and order, independence of the institutions that we have created, and at the same time the ease of doing business. So in Sri Lanka now for more than 10 years, the ease of doing business index being compiled by the World Bank, we have been ranked at very low level, and I mean we already know where we have gone wrong. So instead of taking action against action to rectify that, we cannot ask investor to come and invest in Sri Lanka, because those investors would first refer to the those indices that are being prepared on in case of Sri Lanka, and the information is perfectly available to them.
Doctor, now while the government officials or government ministers are admitting the fact that the country's economy is doing pretty well, the opposition seems to think otherwise. They are saying foreign investors have withdrawn their money out of the country, which has caused lack of investor confidence.
Yeah, that's also true, because at the beginning of year 2015, foreigners had invested in government securities amounted about $3.5 billion US. So over the last say 24-month period, they have taken out about 2.2 billion out of that. So as a result, the total investments have now come down to about 1.2 billion US. At the same time, you would have noted that in the case of the share market, investors come in, invest money, make profits, and take the money out. So on a net basis, there also we have lost total investment they have made in Sri Lanka. So what the opposition is telling is true. But what matters to us now is we have to have a set of economic policy program which should enable us to build up confidence among the investors. So that is where we are lacking today.
So now there's another very tough question that we need to answer. While Minister Ravi Karunanika is going and advertising the fact that Sri Lanka is a very investor-friendly country, we are still failing to see FDIs in the country by foreign nations.
No, we don't get. I mean, even in the past, the type of FDIs we got only to hospitality sector, the tourism sector, hotels. We didn't get actually worthwhile foreign direct investment to the country, because the need of the country is to diversify our export sector, change from the current method of producing garments which are based on simple technology to production of complex technology, and for that purpose we have to get different types of foreign direct investments. Unfortunately, the country was flooded with the investments into the hospitality sector, and that has now saturated. So anymore we cannot expect any more investment into that sector, because we are now at the top level of the position there.
Well, Dr. Vijay, hold that thought. We are going to cross over for a short commercial break. You're watching Biz1st in Focus. We'll see you on the other side. Well, welcome back to Biz1st in Focus. We are joined by former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena. We are discussing about the current economic and financial status of Sri Lanka. And the question we asked at the beginning of the show is, are we in a crisis or not? Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe announced during the weekend that he will be travelling to India and he will be meeting Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Can we touch on that?
Well, that of course I think you have to connect two pieces of information, Zain, because you may recall about 2 months ago when the International Monetary Fund fielded its team to review the ongoing extended fund facility in Sri Lanka, they were not able to come to an agreement with the Sri Lankan authorities. They issued a press statement saying that their negotiations with the Sri Lankan authorities were inconclusive. And they said the further negotiations will be done by the Sri Lankan authorities with the higher-ups in the International Monetary Fund once the spring meetings would start in Washington DC, which in fact started yesterday. So there is a negotiation going on between the Minister of Finance and the Central Bank Governor on our side, and the top management of the International Monetary Fund on the other side, whether the IMF would give us the third installment of the ongoing extended fund facility. We still don't know the outcome of that particular meeting. So given that background, the Prime Minister's rush to India, it appears to me, is either to have a fallback mechanism. If that particular negotiations become unsuccessful, India would stand by us, or it may be an alternative to the IMF arrangement that we are having it. Because even in the past, during the previous regime, it was India which came to Sri Lanka's rescue when we were in a critical situation like this. I can recall in year 2009, India came to our rescue. Then year 2012, they came to our rescue. Then 2014 also India came to our rescue. Because India has an interest in Sri Lanka as a country which is geopolitically connected to India. Therefore, India doesn't want Sri Lanka to fall. The normal arrangement is that when Sri Lanka finds it difficult to finance its own expenses, foreign exchange expenses, the Reserve Bank of India will open a credit line to us, which we call a SOP facility. They give us US dollars so that we can build up our reserves, and also we can meet our urgent foreign exchange requirements. So my guess is that Prime Minister's rush to India should be to open up that particular credit line with the Reserve Bank of India.
So Dr. Vijayawardena, how much longer are we expected to depend on India whenever we fall into trouble?
We can't do that. I mean, we should not do that, because that's not a good strategy. I mean, this is like just like if a person is drowning, he has to depend on even a little piece of straw that is floating on the water in order to get back to the bank. So we are in that situation today. So what matters to us is, the Indian support will provide us some kind of a breathing space, oxygen, immediate oxygen for us to survive. But Sri Lanka's job is to introduce all kinds of economic reforms and to have a economy-wide massive economic plan, decide on our own priorities, what we should do, and of course connect ourselves to the global economy so that we will not be not have to depend on India anymore. So the Indian support is only needed in order for Sri Lanka to survive. Even India knows that. India will not
so right now, would you say that Sri Lanka is on survival mode?
It's a survival mode. I mean, what matters to us is just look at the statistics released by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Now, we have foreign reserves amounting to about $5 billion US dollars. Out of that $5 billion US dollars, $1 billion US dollars we have to take out, because that consists of the gold reserve. Gold reserve we cannot sell in a hurry. So the freely available foreign exchange to Sri Lanka is about $4 billion US dollars. But the total loan repayments that we have to do within the next 12-month period comes to about $4.8 billion US dollars. So we don't have enough money even to repay loans. So that is why it is very crucial for Sri Lanka to have this negotiation with IMF at the Washington spring meeting successful, and also to get this extra credit line opened, if it is the main purpose of the Prime Minister's visit to India, as early as possible, so that we have enough foreign exchange to survive. Otherwise, what would happen is, if we don't have foreign exchange, we cannot meet our import bill, which comes to about 5 to 6 billion US dollars per quarter. Then the critical imports like oil, which we need to produce electricity, because our hydropower has now virtually come down to a level about 10% of the capacity. So people will have to travel from one place to another. So in order to maintain the import program, we need foreign exchange. So that is why it is necessary for us to get into this credit line with India, so that we can actually import some of the critical goods which we need for the construction sector and so forth from India. So it's very, it's actually the Prime Minister visit, I think, in my opinion, it's a good thing that he has done.
Well, Dr. Vijayawardena, we will cross over for another commercial break. We're in discussion with former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena. You're watching Biz First in Focus. Hello, welcome back to Biz1st in Focus. We are in discussion with the former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena. Dr. Vijayawardena, to start off, the oil facility in Trincomalee, India and Japan have expressed their interest and they are involved. What are your comments on this?
Well, it was a facility which was built by the British colonial rulers as far back as 1940s in order to provide supply oil to the British forces that were fighting in the Eastern Asia. And it had been unutilized for more than, I think, now 60 or 70 years. So it's a matter for Sri Lanka to utilize that unused oil facility today, and what matters to Sri Lanka today is to, since we are actually between two powers in Asia, India on one side and China on the other side, and since we have given very kind to China by allowing China to run the Hambantota harbour, there's a necessity for Sri Lanka government to balance the political situation. So in that context, there's nothing wrong in providing the oil facility, unused oil tanks to Indians, but of course when you do so, it has to be done very carefully, because the negotiations have to be done in such a way that Sri Lanka should get a good bargain out of that. So without that, if we just give the oil palm to Indians, will not help us. That's number one. Number two is that when it comes to Hambantota harbour, the harbour had been built now and we cannot just demolish it. We have to make use of the harbour. What is missing in the harbour is, even though it was technically and produced, it was developed there, the Sri Lanka Port Authority didn't have any business plan to run the harbour. Now that is where we are lacking. I mean, we are good at producing things, but we are very weak in having good business plans. Now if you look at this Colombo Port City project, and I had discussed with the port city managers there, the Chinese people had a business plan for the next 25 years. And you will be amazed to see even the best private sector company in Sri Lanka doesn't think even beyond 5 years. So when it comes to planning, when it comes to marketing, when it comes to developing a business strategy, I think the best contender in this case should be China, because China knows how to run it, it knows how to attract the foreign direct investments there, and we will be able to balance the political power between China and Trincomalee by giving them partial concessions.
So how do you think the Sri Lankan government should handle China politically?
Politically, of course, now China, it's a country which has declared again and again China would use peaceful methods to promote global economy, because most of the other countries they had been using either military power or they have been using pressure on other countries to yield to those powers. China had been declined. I mean, they had the Communist Party annual sessions about 2 months ago, and the Chinese president very openly declared, he said that we are for a peaceful development. So when it comes to that level, and also China has this one belt, one road program, where it wants to connect China with the rest of the world, and Sri Lanka can also be one of the important participants in that case. So that is why China is a very important participant in Sri Lanka's economic development.
Doctor, now even though China does not use heavy military power, they do lend out massive amounts of loans to countries like Sri Lanka. So how does this play out?
Well, I mean, the market is such that all international credit flows today, they are based on commercial terms. We had just lost the concessionary credit flows which we had about, say, 20 years ago. No country, except if you are a very poor country today, can get the concessionary funding facility. So it's a choice between China or whether we go to the market. Because now you would have noted the government of Sri Lanka was planning to issue these sovereign bonds, $1.5 billion in the international market, where the government of Sri Lanka will get on at commercial interest rates for a very short period of time. Now Chinese investment comes not only in the form of money but also in the form of a project. So as a result, we will have a project, but our capacity has to be developed for us to run those projects economically, commercially and profitably. For that purpose, there is a necessity for any country to get support from people who have developed those managerial skills.
Doctor, we touched on India's involvement in Trincomalee. What about Japan's involvement? What are their interests?
Japan's the Japan is also now moving out as an investor, because one problem for Japan is that Japan has a huge amount of savings within Japan, and that those savings will have to be utilized in other countries. So what matters to them is simply to have some kind of a foothold in Indian Ocean, so that they would be able to provide make use of that foothold in order to provide other kinds of economic activities in the rest of the Asian countries. That may be the reason, because Sri Lanka in that context is located on a very convenient naval route. So that is why Trincomalee has become a very important point for both India and Japan.
Doctor, now let's move from Trincomalee to Hambantota, the Hambantota harbour in particular. The government of Sri Lanka made negotiations with China. Personally, are you satisfied with the negotiations?
Personally, I mean, the main contention has been about this 99-year lease, about which I don't have any problem. Because if you look at Hong Kong was leased to Great Britain for a 99-year period, and during that period Hong Kong got developed from a very narrow and insignificant port into a vibrant industrial powerhouse over that period. And even China is using Hong Kong as a separate administrative region today, because Hong Kong is a different country. So based on that particular context, I have no problem about giving a 99-year lease to the China. Number two is about this 80-20 equity contribution. Again, I have no problem, because if somebody has put his money into a project, he is taking the risk of the project also up to the amount of money that he has used. Now, for example, if you have put the 100%, Sri Lanka has put 100% money into Hambantota harbour, we are taking 100% risk of the project. Now, what has happened is, when China gets 80% of the Hambantota harbour, China is actually getting the risk of the Hambantota harbour up to 80%, and we as Sri Lanka is getting up to 20%. So when we reduce that proportion to say 50 to 50, that means China's risk is reduced to 50%, and Sri Lanka's risk is increased from 20 to 50%. For Sri Lanka to take that kind of a risk, we have to have a good business plan, good marketing strategies and so forth. So without them, if we get say 50%, means that again Hambantota harbour would be a totally unusable, unproductive capital investment in the country.
So Dr. Vijayawardena, this risk, so to speak, is it for the best interest of the country?
It is best. I mean, if someone else takes the risk on our behalf, isn't it good? For example, take me as an example, and if somebody else takes the risk on my behalf, it is good for me. I don't have to take the risk. So the same principle applies to a nation also.
Dr. Vijayawardena, we have to wrap up in a moment. Quickly, my question at the beginning of the show: is the country in an economic crisis?
We are in economic crisis. I mean, there's no amount of talk that might be delivered by political authorities saying that the country is not in a crisis will not be acceptable to anyone who has access to information released by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, because every week Central Bank releases this information, and that information is very plain clear. I mean, as I told you at the beginning, foreign reserves are falling. Freely available reserves have come down to a level of about $4 billion, whereas our loan commitments are about $4.8 billion. Economic growth has slowed down from around say 9% 5 years ago to 4% last year. Inflation is picking up from virtually zero level to 8.2%. Sri Lanka rupee is under pressure for depreciation. We don't get enough foreign direct investments, and at the same time, our main problem is conducting the necessary economic reforms in order for Sri Lanka to attain a sustainable economic growth. That is also not happening. So based on everything that has been published by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, anyone who has a little knowledge of economics will conclude that we are in a crisis.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Vijayawardena, for joining us this evening on Biz1st in Focus. Well, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, thinks that the country is in an economic crisis. Well, where will Sri Lanka fare, or how will Sri Lanka fare? We have to wait and see. I'm Shahan Jarampati. Good night and take care.